Okay, so we're going to talk about a practice of sacramental organizing. What we're talking about is engaging, encountering others. And the frame that we want to use here is sacred encounter. Now, what we might mean by this specifically is we might talk about one-to-ones. So how do we connect one-to-one with another person? But I want to be clear that we're not only talking about that context. We might be talking about a sort of a way of being with others that is open to encountering others as they are, openly encountering others as they are. So specifically, that might be one-to-one conversations and meetings, like we're going to practice together a little. But it also, I think, reflects a broader sort of orientation to this kind of work. And this practice that we're talking about, sacred encounter, is a fundamental way of acting that embodies and honors that sense of integrated whole humanness, humanity, nefesh, and that resists the dominant culture's ways of doing and being that divide and separate. So this practice is really central and fundamental to the way that we act in sacramental organizing. So my goal here is to communicate hopefully quite a simple thing, but what I experience in this work is quite countercultural and therefore hard for us sometimes to remember. So my goal is to communicate that truly encountering another person, truly listening, engaging, encountering deeply, is motion forward toward collective action. I'm going to say that again. Engaging people deeply, encountering another, is motion forward toward effective action. The reason I say this is that I know I experienced this myself, that we often feel we have this false choice between talking and acting. And sometimes half of our church says, let's get on with this thing. And half the church says, let's make a committee for this thing. And sometimes we get frustrated because we're kind of stuck in the middle of those two. Listening and deciding, right? Have you ever been in a conversation where it feels like there's a debate as to whether we should listen or whether we should decide? Well, this practice that we're talking about is about moving us forward in the direction of action together, moving us forward together through encountering one another. So how does listening, how does encountering one another go about, how does it move us forward? Well, I want to use an illustration here. So let's think about how we generally go about building something or taking action, how we generally do that. The example I want to use is a garden wall. And this is a real example for me because I have a house, I'm here in Tacoma, and we have a house on the hill, and in front of our house is this really steep drop off and there's stairs to get to the front steps. And on both sides is mulch that, you know, hopefully prevents erosion. But every time it rains really heavily, which thankfully it's actually starting to do now, the soil sort of erodes a little bit. And so I've been told over and over again, well, you need like a little retaining wall or a big one or something to hold that in. So what I need to do is I need to build a garden wall. So let's think about like how we generally go about doing that, how I might do that. And if we were in a room together and I really enjoy doing this, like I would ask you this question, like, how do we do this? But I'm just, for the sake of time, I'm going to tell you what I always hear, the same pattern that I always hear, and the one I recognize in myself. So the first step that I recognize when I ask people this question, how do I do this, is you got to make a plan. I have to make a plan. So I'm in charge of the project, so I got to make a plan. So I sit down at my kitchen table, got a piece of paper and a pencil, right? And I'm going to maybe draw a picture of the thing that I need to build. I got to go outside and take measurements. I've definitely got to go on YouTube and look at like all of the many videos instructing me how to do this. And then I've got my plan together, right? Is that fair? And then because I am a male human in America, I get in my truck. I don't have a truck, but I get in my car and I go to Home Depot because that's where you go when you need to get this kind of thing done, right? You go to Home Depot and I gather the materials that I need. And it's important that these materials are available and that they're uniform, but they're the same, right? There's uniform materials because that's the only way my plan works, right? Is if if I like calculate how many bricks I need, I've got to know that the bricks are going to be uniform at the store. So I go and I gather my bricks and my cement and my rebar, whatever I need. Okay, so I make a plan, I gather my materials, and then I build. And I might recruit some people to help, but it's really in executing my plan. Okay, does that sound like basically right? I mean, I've made the mistake of asking this question to engineers in the past, who then have a big specific conversation about building the wall. I'm like, no, it's a metaphor. But so basically, does that sound right? Yes, nodding broadly. Okay, so what the claim I want to make, or what I want to observe, is that I think that and I think that we have internalized this process for how to take action, how to build something. We've internalized this process and applied it to how we build community, how we build congregations and churches, how we build organizations, campaigns, projects, initiatives. Like, we have internalized this process of what it means to build or to take action. And we've applied it in our community lives. And what I want to share is an alternative way of thinking about this similar process, or the similar goal, but which has a completely different process. And what I want to share with you is the idea of a dry stain wall. So I'm from Scotland, and a dry stain wall, if for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, is they're all over Scotland, they're all over the Highlands, and they divide, land from one another, like different farms, or instead of having a big metal fence, they have piles, beautiful, ancient, right? They last, piles of rocks. Not just piles, but walls made of rocks, abundant rocks from the landscape. And the rocks are different sizes. They're big ones and there's little ones. And they're all different shapes, and they're craggy ones, and they're all covered in moss and everything. But a dry stain wall is built with no lime, no mortar or cement. And it's built with irregular, abundant rocks from the landscape. So what's the process, I wonder, of building a dry stain wall? What's the process for me in thinking about building a wall in front of my garden, of building a dry stain instead of the wall that I described? Well, I'll tell you what I think it is. This is the first step. I got some rocks here. This is the first step, I think, of building a dry stain wall. Do you see the first step? The first step of building a dry stain wall is to see the rock. That's it. The first step is to encounter this rock as it is. It might be big, it might be small, it might be thin, it might be craggy, sharp, it might crumble. But the first step is to encounter this rock. The next step might be, if I'm the builder, right? I'm a dry stain builder, and I've gathered and I've encountered a handful or 100, I don't know, rocks. The next stage is to notice alignment. So I've picked up this rock and then I put it down. I've seen it, I've encountered it. Now I'm going to pick up this rock and I'm going to do the same. But I'm not just learning about it so that I know about it. I'm not just listening to the rock so that I've listened to the rock. I'm noticing alignment. And I might notice, I wonder if these two flat sections of rock might fit together. I wonder, I don't know. I noticed that they're similar. That's the second stage of building a dry stain wall. And the third stage of building a dry stain wall, if you're the builder, is to invite connection. Is to say, I wonder if these two flat sections might work together. You might notice some other things too in the process. There might be an experiment. It might work, it might not work. You might say, I wonder if there was another rock here, if that would make a difference. But we invite connection. And then as we perform this process over and over, form emerges. The form of the wall emerges. But the role of the builder is what I want you to pay attention to. The role of the builder is fundamentally different in these processes. Our first process was, I am the leader, I'm the builder. I make a plan, I gather uniform materials, and I execute the plan. And the process of building a dry stain is, I encounter many rocks. I notice alignment. I invite connection, and form emerges. The role of the builder in the dry stain process The first role is to see. Our role is to see, to notice, and to invite. So if it's not blindingly obvious already, this is a metaphor, and it has deeply impacted the way that I do my community organizing work. I think, my friends, that we need to learn and practice building this way, building our churches, our communities, organizations, or our projects. I think we need to practice building through encounter, noticing, and inviting. But what I want to say is that, what do we have at the end of this process when we build a dry stain wall? We've actually built something. We've actually built something. And so I want to return to what I said a minute ago. Sometimes we have this fight between listening and acting, right? This is how we act. This is how we build, through listening and encounter, if we see our role as being fundamentally different. So the people in your church, the people in your community, those neighbors, those beloved ones that you recalled to your heart at the beginning, they're rocks. They're not bricks, right? They're not uniform. They're not ready to be plopped into your plan, into anybody's plan. They're rocks. So to take action, we need to encounter, notice, and align, notice alignment, and make invitations. I want to take a moment to ask why. Why should we build this way? Why should we do it differently? There are two things that I think are very important, and there are other reasons too. Two reasons. One is, this is uncovering. This is an uncovering process. And surely in our spirituality, we have a commitment, we have an orientation to say that the rocks in our community, the people in our community, have been shaped that way by the Spirit. That this is not an accident or a deformation. But the people in our communities and ourselves are shaped differently. Perhaps we can discover and uncover the purpose of our unique shapes. So it's an uncovering of reality. The second reason is that we know what bricks sometimes are made? Bricks can be made from rocks that are harvested from the mountaintops and pounded into gravel and mixed into, right? We can try and turn the natural rocks, the people in our community, into bricks, but that process is called colonization. That process is violence. That is violence. So if we want to build with love and with peace, then alignment and noticing are our practices. The last thing, I guess there's a third reason. The last thing I want to notice is that actually dry stain walls last for generations. That if you go to Scotland or Ireland, or I've heard parts of the South as well, you'll see walls standing that have been there. Why? Why do they stand for a long time? Because they are not fighting their essential nature to be there. They're in their essential nature to be there. And so, do we want to build sustainable communities? Do we want to build sustainable structures? Well, perhaps this is a way that we can move in that direction. Okay, so in a couple of minutes, we're going to move into practice and spend some time listening together. I want to offer a couple of things before we move into that, and Juan Carlos is going to help to set us up for this in a couple of minutes, but I want to offer a couple of considerations as you go into the session with your partner. I think there's three things I want to say, and forgive me because often we have a lot more time to do some of this, and so I'm trying to get down to what is essential here. But I want to offer three things as you go into your time with your partner. So we're going to give you 20 minutes with a partner, and that means 10 minutes where you're sort of initiating and asking questions and listening carefully. You are the dry stain builder. And then you're going to switch and have 10 minutes where the other is initiating. And so if you're initiating the conversation, I want to encourage you to ask open questions. That if your role is to encounter and notice, notice alignment, and then as we practice this in reality and community, to invite. But if our role is to notice, is to encounter and notice, we need to ask questions that are open. And so I encourage you to think about, how do I open this conversation up, so that this person has a chance to reveal something of their shape to me. We need to get a little beyond small talk, folks. We've got to get a little below the surface. And I believe that the transformation of our communities and of ourselves requires something that comes from under the surface. You know, we say we're like icebergs, and that 10% is above the surface and everything else is below, including our grief and our pain, but our hope and our energy too. So we need to get a little under that surface, and opening questions can help us get there. That's number one, ask open questions. The second is a note on boundaries. If we're an iceberg, and if we need to get below the surface to unlock imagination and hope, but also to heal pain, I want to be clear and say that no one has a right to extract those stories, that none of us has a right to reach in or to make it our business to extract those. We don't. That's not what this is about. This is not a delving or a mining, you know, and extracting. The role when we're in the initiating process is to create a space which is safe. If we can, as much as possible, to create a space that is safe and that engenders trust, so that the other is invited, if they choose, to share what they choose with you. So the impetus is on you as a question asker, as an initiator, not to go in and seize stories, but to say, how am I creating a space which is open and safe so that another person might feel, they might be able to choose to share something of themselves from a little below the surface. So the boundary is yours. If you're sharing, it's yours to define. We're not here to cross those boundaries. But I want to encourage you to open yourself as much as you can to your own vulnerability. And the third thing I want to share is to focus, if you're the initiator, to focus on listening and holding your listening openly. The truth of the process, and I can say this from experience as an organizer, the truth of the dry stain process is you have no idea where this particular shape is going to fit. It might be 10 rocks later that you remember this one. Oh, I notice alignment here. And so the practice then is to hold what you're hearing, to hold the listening really openly, with love, with curiosity, and without judgment. So I want to offer these as three considerations as you go in. Ask open questions. Be aware of boundaries and creating safe space so that others choose their own boundary. And the third is to hold your listening with curiosity and love and openness, because you never know where that shape is going to fit. So Juan Carlos, I see your video is off, but are you here to guide us into our next section, or perhaps Melissa can help with that?
No, I'm here. Sorry, I didn't know that my
That's all right. I want to make sure. Yeah. So I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I say one more thing? Just for the recording, it's fine that we did that, but perhaps we switch the recording off for the debrief so that people can feel they can share what they would like. Is that okay? Great.
Hi again, everyone. Let me see. Joey, you are in spotlight. I don't know. Greg, is Joey in spotlight? Is that correct? Or
Juan Carlos, if you just hit gallery view yourself, you can turn that off.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you, Joey. I need to just. There's a lot of guidance and information that you have been sharing with us. So thank you. So we are gonna get into a sacred space, a sacred encounter. As Joey has told us, the practice is about seeing, encountering the other, notice alignment, and start feeling an invitation, a common invitation. So the proposal, or something that we have found that is very helpful when we are practicing, when we are engaging with sacramental organizing, is about the fears that we carry, the fears. We have been saying that our mission, or how we understand our mission, is about moving from fear into courageous love. That's what we have been saying. We are moving from fear into courageous love. And we are inviting other people, and we are encountering with other people within that movement. from fear into courageous love. So how we can move from fear if we don't talk about fear? So the purpose of this time is like exploring about that. Let me share the screen, something very, very fast. So I hope you see this. Let me see. Do you see this in front? Cool. Thank you. It's very simple. We carry fear, but there are threats that are causing the fear. It could be an illusion, like for some people, we are afraid of the future because it's the future, just because it's the future, and we are afraid. But sometimes the threats are real in the present. And also we experience the threats coming from the future. And we start feeling that anxiety, and we live in fear. Also, I mentioned at the beginning that that our bodies, and I'm very happy and really learning from Joey about how we dismember are from our bodies. Our bodies also communicates fear. There are bodies that are not accepted in our society, or bodies that we want to destroy, or bodies that we want to silence. And so our bodies are communicating. And as I said at the beginning, our bodies is a memory of many other bodies. Our body is an ancestral symbol for society. So you see me, but you're seeing an ancestral symbol of many people behind me. And if you deny my body and my fears, you are denying the fears that I carry from many generations as well. So each of you communicate through your body fear and hopes. So we're gonna talk about that, but honoring the body of the other person, even though we are in a virtual environment, but we honor the body of the other person. And we want to talk about how we experience fear. Where is fear in our context right now? Where is fear in our context? How I experience fear in our bodies? What are the threats connected to that? You can divide the conversation. You can start by saying, well, I experience fear about this. And the quality of that fear in my body is something like anxiety or paralyzing me. You can explore that together. But you can talk about the threats that you are experiencing, the closest threats to you. So what are the fears in your context? Take note about this question, please. You can write it down so you will be prepared. Where is fear present in your context? How is fear present for you? And what are the threats nurturing that fear? So connecting how is fear present for you, and what are the threats nurturing that fear? You can make a minute of silence once you are getting together. You're gonna be with one more person, and I know that some people, we are scared just being with another person in a virtual room and say, "Oh man, who are you? I'm not gonna talk about my fears here." Well, let's start sending a very good energy for each pair of people who are gonna be sharing about this. But as Joey has reminding us, this is the root of the sacramental organizing work. Finding the other as the other is, like the rock. So we are together in this. Let's explore it together, and we will come back and then we'll see.